On the edge of known space, where the stars grew thin and the silence between them stretched like old cloth, a moon hung alone in the dark. It was not a natural moon. Its surface shimmered with veins of blue light pulsing slowly, like a sleeping heart. This was Kalis 9, the last neutral port before the void. Here, laws bent, names vanished, and anyone could be bought. Inside a dome of black glass and humming alloy, beneath twin moons that cast silver shadows across the floor, an auction unfolded in near silence. There were no shouts, no raised voices. Bidders sat in shadowed booths, their faces hidden behind shifting veils of light. Offers came through touchpads, numbers flickering in the air like ghostly insects. The only sound was the soft chime of credits transferring, and the occasional whisper of breath. At the center of the room stood a woman. She was tall and slender, her skin pale as frost, her long hair the color of midnight smoke. Her ears rose to delicate points, marking her as something other than human. Her eyes, large, silver, and filled with quiet sorrow, scanned the room without hope. She wore a simple gray tunic, no chains, no collar, but her wrists were bound by thin bands of null metal, dull and cold, designed to dampen any innate power she might possess. Beside her, curled at her feet like a shadow-given form, lay a small dragon. It was no larger than a house cat, its scales black as burnt glass, catching the dim light in sharp glints. Its wings were folded tight against its body, and its eyes, golden and slit-pupiled, never left the crowd. It made no sound, but its tail twitched with every new bid, a silent warning. Her name was Lila. Once she had been a daughter of the Sylvan Vale, a hidden realm woven between folds of space and time known only to a few. Her people were ancient, peaceful, and long thought extinct. They lived in harmony with starlight and song. Their cities grown from living trees that bloomed with bioluminescent flowers. But war had come, not with fire or fleets, but with silence. The Obsidian Covenant, a vast, faceless empire that consumed worlds without noise or mercy, had found them. They tore the veil, shattered the songs, and scattered her people like ash on the solar wind. Lila had escaped with only Ember, her childhood companion, a dragon hatchling gifted to her by the last elder. They fled through rifts and ruins, surviving on scraps and starlight until hunger and exhaustion led them to Kalis 9. There, betrayed by a smuggler they'd trusted, they were captured and sold. Now she stood on the auction block, not as a warrior, not as a princess, but as property. The auctioneer, a slender being with too many joints and a voice like static, spoke without moving its mouth. Lot 703. Elven female, origin unknown. Non-aggressive, possesses minor empathic resonance. Includes bonded juvenile void dragon. Starting bid, 50,000 credits. A number appeared in the air. It climbed quickly. 75,120. 200. Lila kept her gaze low. She had seen what happened to those sold to collectors, warlords, or worse. The laboratories of the Alliance Fringe, where alien biology was dissected for profit. She tightened her fingers, wishing she could reach down and stroke Ember's head, but the null bands hummed faintly, reminding her of their presence, stealing even the smallest spark of her will. Then, a new bid. 300,000. The number hung in the air longer than the others. The room stilled. Even the auctioneer paused, its static voice softening in surprise. 300,000 was far beyond market value for an unknown species with no proven utility. Murmurs rippled through the booths. Who would pay so much for a weeping elf and her pet? In booth 12, a man sat alone. He wore a plain gray uniform, no insignia, no rank. His face was unremarkable. Brown eyes, short dark hair, a scar along his jawline that spoke of old battles. His name was Daniel Cross. Once he had been a fleet commander in the United Terran Alliance. Now, he was something else. Something quieter. Something that moved in the edges, mending what others broke. He had not come to Kalis 9 looking for a bride, a slave, or a weapon. He had come chasing a rumor that a being from the Sylvan Vale still lived. His sister, years ago, had vanished near the Vale's last known coordinates. She had sent one final message before silence. They sing in colors we cannot see. Daniel never forgot it. When he saw Lila, he knew, not because of her ears or her eyes, but because of the way she stood, like a tree in a storm, bent but not broken. And the dragon, Ember, it watched him not with fear but with ancient knowing. He entered the bid without hesitation. The auctioneer cleared its throat. 300,000. Any advance? No one answered. Going once? Lila closed her eyes. She imagined her mother's voice singing the lullaby of the twin moons. She imagined Ember's wings wrapping around her like a shield. She prepared for the worst, going twice. Then silence. Sold. To booth 12. The null bands clicked open. Lila flinched as the pressure vanished as if her bones had been holding their breath. Ember rose instantly, pressing against her leg. A low rumble in its chest. Not a growl, more like a question. 2 guards approached, but Daniel waved them off. He stepped down from the booth himself, boots echoing on the glass floor. He stopped a few paces from her, hands open at his sides, palms visible. "My name is Daniel," he said, voice low and calm. "You're not a prisoner. You're free to go, but I'd be honored if you stayed with me for a while." Lila stared at him. No demands, no orders, just an offer. It felt like a trap, but his eyes held no hunger, only weariness and something else. Respect. "Why?" she whispered, her voice rough from disuse. "Because you've lost enough," he said simply, "and because I think you might help me find something I lost too." Ember tilted its head, studying Daniel. Then slowly it blinked once, a sign in dragon language of cautious trust. Lila hesitated. Every instinct screamed to run. But where? The veil was gone. Her people were dust. And this human, he did not look like the monsters who had taken everything. She nodded just once. Daniel smiled faintly. "Welcome aboard, Lila." He led them out of the dome, past the shifting lights and silent watchers, into the cold night of Kalis 9. Above them, the twin moons cast their silver glow, one full, one half-shaded, just like in the old songs. For the first time in months, Lila felt something stir inside her. Not hope, not yet, but the quiet space where hope might one day grow. As they walked toward a waiting shuttle, Ember leapt onto her shoulder, warm and solid. Daniel opened the hatch and gestured for her to enter first. She paused on the threshold, looking back at the auction dome, now a dark silhouette against the stars. She would not return there. Inside the shuttle, the air was warm. Soft lights glowed along the walls. A blanket lay folded on one seat. On the console, a small bowl of water sat beside a dish of dried fruit. Simple, clean, familiar. "Where are we going?" she asked. "Series 7, Daniel said, taking the pilot's seat. "My home. It's quiet, safe, and it has windows that look out at the stars." Lila sat down, clutching the blanket. Ember curled in her lap, eyes half closed. As the engines hummed to life and the shuttle lifted into the sky, Lila watched the moon shrink below. Tears welled in her eyes, not of fear but of exhaustion, grief, and the strange weight of being seen. Daniel did not look back. He gave her space, silence, and time, and for now that was enough. The shuttle ride lasted 3 days. Lila slept most of it, curled in the rear seat with Ember nestled against her chest. Daniel spoke only when necessary, offering food, adjusting the cabin temperature, or pointing out a passing nebula through the viewport. He never asked her questions, never pressed. It confused her. In all her time among strangers, no one had ever given her silence as a gift. When they arrived at Series 7, the moon surprised her. It was small and gray, scarred by old craters but wrapped in a thin, breathable atmosphere held in place by ancient terraforming rings. Orbiting above it was a single station, shaped like a broken wheel, spinning slowly in the starlight. Below, nestled in a wide crater, stood the fortress. It was not built. It was assembled. Made from the hulls of old warships, cargo haulers and scout vessels welded together over decades. Solar panels glinted on its surface like scales, and vines, real, green, living vines, crept along some of the outer walls. Smoke curled from a chimney near the top. It looked less like a military base and more like a home stitched together from scraps of war. Daniel guided the shuttle into a landing bay carved into the crater wall. The moment the ramp lowered, cool air rushed in, carrying the scent of metal, ozone, and something earthy. Soil, maybe, or moss. "This is it," he said. "Not much, but it's quiet." Lila stepped out, Ember hopping down beside her. The ground was solid rock, but softened by patches of hardy grass. Ahead, a heavy door slid open, revealing a wide corridor lit by warm amber lights. A few humans moved inside. Technicians, medics, engineers, but none approached. They nodded to Daniel, glanced curiously at Lila, then went about their work. He led her through winding halls lined with pipes and data cables, past humming generators and quiet rooms filled with strange machines. Finally, they stopped at a door marked with a simple symbol, a circle with a leaf inside. "Your room," he said, pressing a panel beside it. The door hissed open. Inside was a space unlike anything Lila had seen since leaving the Vale. The walls were smooth white alloy but covered in shelves of books. Real paper books, not data slates. A bed with soft blankets sat near a large window that looked out into the stars. A small desk held a lamp, a glass of water, and a bowl of fruit. Apples, oranges, and something purple she did not recognize. In one corner, a low cushion had been placed for Ember, with a shallow dish of water beside it. And on the floor, near the window, sat a pot of soil with a single green shoot pushing through. Lila stared at it. "You grew this, tried to," Daniel said. "It's a moon willow sapling. I read they're native to your kind. Not sure if it'll live, but I thought you might like to see something green." She turned away so he would not see her eyes fill. No one had ever tried to remember what her people loved. For the first week, Lila stayed in her room. She ate the food left outside her door. She read the books. Poems about lost stars, stories of peace after war, maps of galaxies she had never seen. Ember explored the fortress, returning each evening with bits of wire, shiny bolts, or once a small stuffed bird it had found in storage. It dropped these treasures at her feet like offerings. Daniel never entered her room. Every evening, he left something new outside the door. A sketch of a nebula, a cup of warm tea, a music chip with soft instrumental tunes. Once he left a small wooden flute. Lila picked it up, turned it in her hands, and almost played the old lullaby. But she stopped herself. Songs from the Vale were dangerous now. The Covenant hunted by sound. Still, the flute stayed on her desk. On the 8th day, she stepped outside. The fortress was quieter than she expected. No alarms, no shouting, just the low hum of life support and the occasional clang of tools. She wandered the halls, Ember padding beside her. People nodded as she passed, some offering shy smiles. No one asked who she was or why she was there. She found Daniel in the courtyard. It was an open space in the center of the fortress, open to the sky. Real sky, not a screen, not a projection. Above, the twin stars of Series 7's system cast long shadows. In the middle of the yard stood a workbench covered in tools and half-finished drones. Daniel knelt beside it, his sleeves rolled up, carefully soldering a wire into a small hovering unit. He looked up when she approached. "Good morning." She stood at the edge of the yard, arms crossed. "Why did you bring me here?" He set down his tool. "You needed a place to rest, and I needed someone who understands what silence really means. You could have left me on Kalis 9. "I could have," he said, "but I didn't want to." Ember trotted over and sniffed at the drone. Daniel held out a hand, and after a moment the dragon let him scratch behind its horns. A soft purr rumbled from its chest. Lila watched, surprised. Ember did not trust easily. "You knew about the Vale?" she said slowly. "Not much," he admitted. "Just stories. My sister. She believed in it. She vanished trying to find it. I never found her body, but I found her journal. In it she wrote about silver-eyed women who sang stars into bloom." Lila's breath caught. That was a secret verse, part of the elder songs never shared with outsiders. "How do you know that phrase, 'I don't'?" he said. "I'm just repeating what she wrote. Maybe it meant nothing, but when I saw you, I thought maybe it meant something after all." They stood in silence for a long time. The wind stirred the grass at their feet. Ember curled around Daniel's boot, eyes closed. Finally, Lila spoke again. "You didn't buy me to use me." "No," he said. "I bought you to protect you. And maybe to learn from you." "Learn what?" "How to listen," he said. "Humans talk too much. We shout over the quiet things that matter." That night, Lila left her door open. The next morning, she found a new book outside, this one filled with star charts of the outer rim. Tucked inside was a note written in neat handwriting. The Vale's last signal came from Sector Varel 9. "If you ever want to look, I'll go with you." She did not reply, but she kept the note. Days turned into weeks. Lila began joining Daniel in the courtyard. At first, she just watched. Then she asked questions about the drones, the fortress, the alliance. He answered simply, never hiding the truth. He told her about the war with the Covenant, how they moved like shadows, erasing entire colonies without a trace, how no one knew what they wanted, only that they took everything. One afternoon, as they sat sharing a meal of roasted tubers and spiced broth, Lila asked the question that had haunted her. Why did you pay so much for me? Daniel set down his spoon. Because you were the last of something beautiful, and the universe is running out of beautiful things. Ember, lying between them, opened one eye and gave a soft chirp. Lila looked down at her hands. For the first time since the veil fell, she did not feel like a ghost. She felt seen. That evening, she walked to the courtyard alone. The stars above were bright, clear. She took the wooden flute from her pocket and brought it to her lips. Softly, hesitantly, she played 3 notes, the beginning of the lullaby. The air shimmered. Just for a moment, the stars seemed to pulse in time with the melody. The grass glowed faintly blue at the edges. Ember lifted its head, eyes wide. From the doorway, Daniel watched silent. When the notes faded, Lila turned. He stood there, not smiling, not speaking, just present. "Thank you," she said. He nodded. "Thank you for trusting me enough to play." She did not know what the future held. The Covenant was still out there. Her people were still gone. But here, in this fortress of salvaged steel and quiet kindness, something new was beginning to grow. And for the first time in a long time, Lila let herself believe it might bloom. The peace did not last. It came in the form of a signal, a broken transmission picked up by the outer sensors of Series 7. Static at first, then a voice thin and trembling, speaking in a language no human had ever heard. But Lila knew it. It was the tongue of the veil, twisted by fear. She stood in the comm room, hands gripping the edge of the console, as the recording played again. The words were fragmented but clear enough. "They are coming. Through the rift. They wear the faces of the lost." Daniel stood beside her, face grim. "Do you know what it means, the Covenant?" she whispered. They found a way into human space. Within hours, alerts flashed across the Alliance network. Outposts along the rim had gone dark. Entire colonies silent. No explosions, no distress calls, just absence, like a shadow passing over a candle. Daniel called a meeting in the war room, a chamber deep in the fortress lined with screens and star maps. Officers from nearby stations joined via hologram, their faces tight with worry. Strategies were debated. Fortify the inner systems, evacuate the fringe, launch preemptive strikes. But no one knew how the Covenant moved, how they struck without warning. Lila sat in the corner, Ember coiled in her lap, listening. She saw the fear in their eyes, the confusion. They were fighting a ghost. After the meeting, Daniel found her on the observation deck staring out at the stars. "You know something," he said. She hesitated. Sharing the truth meant revealing the last secret of her people, the one thing that might still protect them. But if she stayed silent, more would die. "The Covenant does not travel through space," she said softly. "They travel through silence." He frowned. "What does that mean?" In the veil, sound was life. Songs held the stars in place. Whispers healed the sick. Our voices shaped reality. The Covenant. They feed on silence. They erase sound and with it memory, identity, hope. That is how they take worlds, by making them forget they ever existed. Daniel was quiet for a long time. "So how do we fight silence with song?" she said. "But not any song. The lullaby of the twin moons. It is the oldest melody of my people. It resonates at a frequency that disrupts their silence field. It cannot destroy them, but it can wake the worlds they have touched. Can you teach it to us?" She looked down at her hands. "It is not just notes. It must be felt, believed, sung with truth." "Then we will learn," he said. For days, Lila worked with the Alliance's sound engineers. She sang the lullaby into recorders, breaking it into tones, harmonics, pulses. They wove it into carrier waves, embedded it in comm signals, broadcast it through every available channel. Daniel ordered every ship in the sector to play it on loop, even if it seemed foolish. Some commanders refused. They called it superstition, but Daniel used his old rank, his old name, and made it happen. Meanwhile, Ember grew restless. It paced the halls at night, wings half spread, eyes glowing faintly. Lila knew why. Dragons of the Veil were attuned to resonance. Ember could feel the Covenant drawing near, like a pressure in the air before a storm. One evening, as Lila practiced the lullaby in the courtyard, Ember suddenly leapt onto the workbench and knocked over a tool. It stared at her, then at the sky. "You feel it too," she said. The dragon chirped sharply. That night, the sensors screamed. The Covenant had arrived, not with fleets, not with fire, but with a single vessel. It hung in orbit above Series 7, black and smooth, shaped like a teardrop. No lights, no emissions, just stillness. Then, silence fell. Not the quiet of night, but a deep, unnatural hush. The wind stopped. The hum of the fortress faded. Even Ember's purr vanished. Lila's breath caught in her throat. She could hear her own heartbeat, loud and frantic. Daniel grabbed her hand. Stay close. They ran to the command center. The screens flickered, then went dark. Outside the viewport, the stars seemed dimmer, as if veiled. They are draining sound, Lila said. If they succeed, Series 7 will forget itself. The people will wander empty until they fade. Play the song, Daniel ordered. The engineers activated the broadcast. At first, nothing happened. The silence pressed harder. Then from the speakers, a single note rang out. Clear, pure, alive. The effect was instant. The lights flickered back on. The wind returned with a sigh. Ember let out a joyful trill. Outside, the stars brightened. But the Covenant ship did not retreat. It pulsed once. A ripple of darkness spreading through space. They are adapting, Lila said. The recording is not enough. It needs a living voice. Without waiting, she ran to the main transmitter room. Daniel followed. She climbed onto the platform, placed her hands on the resonance plate, and closed her eyes. She sang, not just the lullaby, but the whole truth of it. The grief for her lost home, the hope for this new one. The love growing in her heart for the quiet man who had given her space to heal. Her voice rose, weaving through the fortress, through the air, into the void. The Covenant ship shuddered. Cracks appeared on its surface, glowing with soft blue light. The color of the veil. Inside those cracks, faint echoes of voices could be heard. Whispers of the worlds it had consumed. On the bridge of the nearest Alliance cruiser, commanders watched in awe as their sensors came alive. They heard the song, and they joined in, not with voices but with every system they had. Engines hummed in harmony. Shields pulsed to the rhythm. Even the weapons fired in time with the melody. The battle of the shattered ring had begun. Lila sang until her voice broke. Daniel held her steady, his hand on her back. Ember stood on the console, wings spread, adding its own deep hum to the chorus, and far above, the Covenant ship split open like a seed, releasing a wave of sound, of memory, of names, of light. When it was over, the ship was gone. Only stardust remained. In the command center, cheers erupted, but Lila collapsed exhausted. Daniel caught her before she hit the floor. You did it, he whispered. We did, she murmured. Leaning into him, Ember nuzzled her cheek, purring loudly now, proudly. In the days that followed, the Alliance hailed the victory as a miracle. They called it the Song of Ceres. But Lila knew the truth. It was not magic. It was connection. It was choosing to remember, to feel, to care. And for the first time, she saw humans not as invaders or strangers, but as allies, maybe even as kin. That night, as she rested in her room, Daniel left a new gift outside her door. Not a book, not food, but a small music box. When opened, it played the first 3 notes of the lullaby. Lila held it close, tears warm on her cheeks. The war was not over. The Covenant would return, but now they knew how to fight, not with guns alone, but with song and with each other. After the battle, the fortress changed, not in its walls or its systems, but in its breath. The air felt lighter, warmer, as if the victory had left behind a kind of quiet joy. People moved with less tension in their shoulders. Laughter returned to the mess hall. Even the machines seemed to hum with a softer tone. Lila no longer stayed in her room. She walked the halls freely, often with Ember trotting beside her or perched on her shoulder. She helped in the med bay, using old veil techniques to soothe pain with gentle touch and whispered tones. She taught the children of the station, those born in orbit who had never seen real grass, how to listen to the wind for stories. And every evening she joined Daniel in the courtyard. He had begun clearing a section of the yard, tearing out old metal plating and hauling in real soil from storage tanks. It was hard work, but he did it slowly, patiently, as if building something sacred. One morning, Lila found him kneeling in the dirt, hands covered in soil, planting small green shoots. What are these, she asked. Moon willows, he said, wiping his brow. I ordered seeds from every botanical archive I could find. Some might be real. Most are probably fakes, but we'll see. She knelt beside him. The soil was cool and rich, smelling of rain and life. She touched one of the sprouts. It trembled, then glowed faintly at her touch. Daniel watched, eyes wide. It knows you. It remembers, she corrected softly. From that day on, they built the garden together. They laid paths of smooth river stones, salvaged from an old terraforming project. They installed soft lights that mimicked dawn and dusk. They brought in flowering vines that clung to trellises made of scrap metal. Ember helped too, digging small holes with its claws, then curling up in the shade to guard the new growth. As the weeks passed, the garden bloomed, not just with plants but with moments. Lila began to smile more. Not the polite, careful smiles of before, but real ones, wide, unguarded, lighting up her silver eyes. She laughed when Ember chased a mechanical beetle and got its tail stuck in a pipe. She sang while watering the plants, and the flowers leaned toward her voice like sunflowers to light. Daniel changed too. He spoke more, not just orders or facts, but thoughts, memories, dreams. He told her about growing up on Mars, about his sister's love for old Earth music, about the first time he saw a real ocean. He listened when she spoke of the veil, not with pity, but with wonder. One evening, as they sat on a bench beneath a young moon willow, Lila asked the question that had been growing in her heart. "You offered me freedom after the battle. Why did you think I would leave?" He looked at her, the starlight catching in his eyes. "Because you deserve to choose. You still do. And if I choose to stay, then I am the luckiest man in this sector." Ember, curled at their feet, let out a contented rumble. The garden became their sanctuary. Others came too, not to speak but to sit, to breathe, to remember what peace felt like. A technician brought her daughter to watch the flowers glow at dusk. An old pilot napped in the shade, his war medals tucked away in a drawer. Even the fortress's stern head of security was seen watering the lavender patch when he thought no one was looking. Lila began braiding flowers into crowns. She made one for Ember, tiny and woven with star blossoms. She made one for herself, simple and white. And one evening, as Daniel repaired a broken irrigation line, she made one for him. She approached quietly, the crown hidden behind her back. He looked up, grease on his hands, sweat on his forehead. "Stand still," she said. He obeyed. She placed the circlet of moon blossoms on his head. The petals shimmered faintly, reacting to his warmth. He touched it gently. "Why? Because you kept your promise," she said. "You never tried to own me. You gave me space to heal, and now you've given me a home." He looked at her for a long time. Then he took her hand. "And you gave me more than I ever asked for." No one spoke of the future. Not yet, but something had shifted. The space between them was no longer empty. It was filled with shared silence, shared work, shared hope. One night a storm rolled in. Not of rain, but of solar wind. The sky turned violet, and auroras danced above the crater rim. Lila and Daniel stood in the garden watching the light show, Ember between them. "Do you miss it?" he asked. "The veil every day," she said. "But not the way I used to. Grief changes. It doesn't disappear, but it makes room for other things." Like joy, she agreed. He squeezed her hand. "I'm glad you stayed. So am I." In the weeks that followed, they expanded the garden. They added a small pond fed by recycled water, where silver fish darted among lily pads. They hung wind chimes made from old ship parts, and their soft music blended with Lila's songs. People began calling it the heart of Series 7. And in that heart, something new was growing, not just plants, but trust. Not just peace, but love. Slowly, quietly, like roots reaching through dark soil, it bloomed. The day began with soft light. Not the harsh glare of station lamps, but the gentle gold of dawn spilling over the crater rim of Series 7. The garden was already awake, flowers unfurling, leaves shimmering with dew, Ember stretching on its favorite sun-warmed stone. Lila stood at the edge of the pond, watching her reflection ripple in the water. She wore a simple dress of woven silver thread, made by the station's tailors from old veil patterns she had described. It felt like home, but new. Today was the day, not a battle day. Not a day of fear or flight. Today was a day of choosing, openly, freely, in front of those who had become family. Daniel had asked her weeks ago, not with grand words, but with quiet honesty. "If you stay, I want the whole universe to know it's because you want to, not because you have to." She had said yes. Now, as the twin moons set behind the fortress, the courtyard filled with people, not just humans, but a few from other worlds. Engineers from the Vega Rim, a medic from the Orion enclaves, even a silent, cloaked traitor from the Fringe who had once tried to buy her on Kalis 9. They came not for spectacle, but for witness. Ember sat on a stone arch draped with moonwillow vines, wings spread wide like a banner of living night. Its golden eyes watched everything, proud and alert. Daniel waited beneath the arch. He wore no uniform, just a dark tunic and trousers clean and simple. In his hands he held 2 small rings, forged from scrap metal of the first Covenant ship they had broken with song. They were unpolished, rough, but real. Lila walked toward him, barefoot on the stone path, the hem of her dress brushing the grass. She did not rush. She let every step carry the weight of all she had been and all she had become. When she reached him, he took her hands. They were warm, steady. An old technician named Mara, who had helped build the garden, stood before them. She was not a priest, not a judge, just a woman who had seen too much war and too little kindness. She spoke without ceremony. "This is not a binding," she said, her voice clear and soft. "No chains, no contracts. Only words spoken true." Lila nodded. Daniel nodded. "Lila of the Veil," Mara said. "What do you say?" Lila looked at Daniel, at the quiet strength in his eyes, at the man who had given her space to heal, who had listened when no one else would, who had fought not to own her, but to protect her right to choose. "I was sold," she said, voice clear and strong. "But I choose you." A murmur moved through the crowd, not of surprise but of understanding. Mara turned to Daniel. "And you, Daniel Cross," he looked at Lila, at the woman who had brought song back to a silent world, who had turned a fortress of war into a garden of peace, who had trusted him with her tears and her truth. "I bought a chance," he said, "and found a lifetime." Mara smiled. She stepped back. They placed the rings on each other's fingers. No one clapped. No one shouted. But the garden seemed to sigh in relief, as if it had been holding its breath. Ember leapt down from the arch and circled them once, then settled at their feet, purring like distant thunder. Above, the stars watched, and for the first time in a long time they did not feel cold. After the vows, there was no feast, no music, no dancing. Just quiet celebration. People shared food from the garden. Roasted tubers, sweet berries, bread baked in the old oven Daniel had installed. Children played near the pond, chasing glowing fireflies engineered from station biolabs. Ember accepted treats from everyone, but never strayed far from Lila's side. As night deepened, Lila and Daniel walked to the edge of the crater, where the view opened to the full sweep of space. The Alliance fleet hung in the distance, lights blinking like distant fireflies of their own. "Peace held for now. Do you think they'll come back?" Lila asked. "The Covenant," Daniel said. "Yes, but next time they'll hear us coming." She leaned against him. "We'll be ready. Together." They stood in silence, watching the stars. Not as strangers, not as buyer and bought, not as human and elf, but as partners. As equals. As something new. Far away in the quiet folds between worlds, a whisper moved through the void. Not of war, not of loss, but of a story. A story of a woman with silver eyes, a dragon with ancient eyes, and a man who chose kindness over conquest. A story that would be told in hidden corners of the galaxy, in hushed tones and hopeful hearts, and on Series 7. In a garden grown from scrap and song, love bloomed, not with fanfare, but with roots deep enough to hold the weight of stars.